Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, based on your time zone. Welcome in Salesforce Apex Hour, and my name is Amit. I'm your host, and today topic is Channel Your Omni, and we have a great speaker, Chris and Ines, with us. Without taking more time, let me hand over to our speaker for their introduction. So hand over to you, Chris and Ines.
I'll start it. So, hi guys. Well, thank you for coming along today. I'm Chris Bicknell, joined by MVP Ines Garcia to talk you through Channel Your Omni. Having some technical issues. Give me a second. There we go. And let me move along. Great.
Yeah, and we are here thanks to Amit, or by Amit's fault. So we're just gonna hope it's gonna work the best. And just a little bit about ourselves.
Yeah, so as I said, my name is Chris Bicknell. I'm currently a Salesforce admin in the UK for a company called Which. I'm certified admin. I've been in the ecosystem for just around 4 years. So initially starting off as support for a Salesforce org. It's kind of grown since then, helped roll out Omni Channel. I also kind of enjoy messing around with products like MyTrailhead and Einstein Analytics, or Tableau CRM as it's now called. I met the wonderful Miss Garcia in Hive, and I'll let you describe yourself in as your busy little section of this.
Thanks, Chris. So we are two ninjas here. I'm not so sure how end up Chris start calling me ninja, or I self-imposed myself that title when we were working together. But yes, hola, I am Ines Garcia. I'm an agile coach and a Salesforce MVP. And I have 11 certs plus 2 that got phased out, unfortunately. And I've been doing this work since 2013. So what I do is advocate for the community and agile. And I get involved, as you can see, with trillion things because, I think we only live once. So always inventing things. I love board games. And one of my inventions a couple of years ago, it was a game for teams. So mixing, the love for games with the work that I do, and my latest adventures, I think we could call just publishing a book. And you probably guessed it, is a book about Salesforce and Agile, because I like to demystify what is all this hype of Agile about and really bring it down to earth, to its core, so that you can see the daily work that we do as a consultants and admins, architects, developers, you name it, humans, so that we can deliver value in a less painful, more thriving, and more joyful way. So this is more.
And for context, the reason that Ines is a ninja is she was our Scrum Master in Hive, and any issues or any questions you had, you just had to release the ninja and she would get them sorted.
Okay, so why we're here? So Omni Channel, I assume many people have heard about the functionalities. So that's kind of what we're going to cover, is why the existence of the Omni Channel functionality in the first place. What is it? Where you find it? When to use it? Who is it for? How does it work? And then some gotchas. Yeah, so we're going to get them all like Pokemon.
Yeah, let's get started.
So work nowadays can come from anywhere. And as new channels emerge, it can feel like, the business kind of a struggle to keep up. And as a customer, it can be rather frustrating. In a study showed that 34% of millennials say that they rather go to the dentist than call a customer service. And, I can totally relate to that. One of the things that you may see in this image is a cherry, and that's also a reason of existence. So having a functionality which will cover of Omni Channel also helps you avoid what is called cherry picking the work. So through Omni-Channel Customer Service Center, what helps you is allows you or your customers to connect with your support staff using multiple channels, right? Good name for it. And at the same time, your support agents have immediate access to a holistic picture of the person that they are talking about or they are about to help. So without having to pass the customer around the houses, resolving issues quickly. So that's the aim. And then here you can see how it works. So the functionality within Salesforce, things can come like emails or web or chat, voice, social, many different places. So those are items of work. Now, when you map those things coming into Salesforce is mapped to objects like case or chat session and other things. And so once you have it mapped to different objects, you can use queues and routing. You also have the functionality of skills. We'll tell you a bit more, but essentially you're mapping those bits of work into queues that can be prompted into an agent. And it's going to be looking at okay, is the agent present? Yes or no? If yes, does the agent have capacity? Yes or no? If yes, is the agent accepting the work? If you give them that option, right? And then it'll pop up something like this into the console, the service console, for them to consume that work.
And we will go into a little bit more detail on this in the demo we're about to do, so you'll actually see it kind of happen in live time.
So the toolbox of the things that you guys are going to see in a minute. So first you have service channels, and the service channels, what lets you is to turn almost any Salesforce object as cases, lead, messaging session, for digital engagement, or even a custom object into a work record. Then you have the concept of routing configurations, and that is to determine how work items are get routed to agents, and you can use them to prioritize the relative importance and size of the work items, because not everything weighs the same, into your queues. And then that way, the most important work items are handled accordingly, and then the work is evenly distributed across your agents. So to start routing work items to agents, you create what's called routing configurations, and then you assign those routing configurations into queues, which kind of leads us to the next, which is the associate of routing configurations into agents with queues. And queues are like a classic of Salesforce, of the element of Salesforce. And so that helps your teams to manage leads or cases, contact requests, custom object, you name it, whatever you've mapped. And then Omni Channel, what it does is kind of supercharge your queues to be able to route work items to your agents in real time. So agents don't have to select work items manually from queues, because Omni Channel routes the work to agents automatically in real time. So it reduces the burden of admin of what am I going to work next, and also reduces the cherry picking, what we call earlier. And then you have the concept of presence. And in Omni Channel, you have two types of presence. And one is configurations, which is like the presence configurations will determine how much work agents can take on and what omni-channel behaviors they can access while they are helping customers. So you can have various configurations for different groups of agents who support different channels, and then set how much can agents handle. Also define if the agents can decline or not that work coming in. And then the second presence is the present statuses. And that basically indicates whether an agent is online and available to consume work, or whether the agent is away or offline. And with all of this, you also get a magic bonus. So having Omni-Channel, it gives you the ability to have something called Omni-Channel Supervisor. And this is a view, as you guys can see here, but we'll see live, that has 3 different dimensions. So you can see all the agents. So that's the agent dimension. What are the status, how long they've been on that status since how long it's been since they consumed some kind of work, which were they working on, which type of channels they have available to work on, which percentage of capacity they have. You also have a view where you can see like if it was the calendar, so you see all the things that has happened on a day, a period of time. And also you can click through that particular thing that they may work on, and then you can help out as a supervisor, let's say. That will be like dimension of agents. Then you have the dimension of queues, which is similarly, so out of all the different queues that you have, how much work is in those queues, how long since the biggest thing is being waiting for, and things like that. And the very last item is the concept of work. We talked about work item. So it's another dimension to see what you have to handle at your hands. And with that little intro, which I hope I give enough flavor of the different pieces that this functionality contains, Chris, it's all yours. Show us how it's done.
Thanks, Inez. Yeah, apologies. You have the heavy part of the first part of our talk. You just talk. So I'll give you a rest, and yeah, we'll go through the demo. Hi guys. So yeah, what we've got today for you is it's a very basic interpretation of Omni that we've kind of put together. It uses the queue based routing model. So yeah, we're going to go through a very quick example of a day-to-day for your end user, and then obviously I'll jump into the back end as well, so you guys can see how we've set it all up. Excellent. So first things first, this obviously is our org. As you notice down here at the bottom, we have a utility item for Omni Channel, which Jenna's going to mention. This is essentially where your agent will monitor their work and obviously change their status as well. You can see at the moment my status is set to offline, so the agent won't receive any work. But they can open up this drop down, and they have a list of service presences, easy for me to say. As kind of Inez mentioned, just think of these as availability indicators to Omni to essentially confirm whether or not the agent is available to consume work or not. But with that, I'll move myself into available. And excellent, you can now see that this end user has been pushed 3 pieces of work. So they've been pushed 3 cases, which all appear in the Omni Channel widget. If I accept this work, it will automatically open a new tab onto my screen with each case, which is great. Agents can also confirm, as I said, which work they have been assigned during their session within this My Work tab here. So if they ever get themselves a little bit lost, they can always find it here. Excellent. What you may have also noticed as well as part of our statuses is the end users of this org don't just consume casework, they also consume chat as well. We have different statuses available for that. Again, we'll kind of explain in the back end exactly how we achieve this. But just to give you an example of being able to handle both types of work at the same time, I will trigger customer chat. Using my wife's laptop, so that's not my name. Excellent. So if I initiate the chat, if I move back to Omni, you'll see that I've now been assigned another piece of work, which is of the chat variety. So I can accept this chat. And as you can see, I'm now handling 4 pieces of work at the one time, which is a mixture of both cases and chat. It's pretty cool. And to finish off, if the agent has successfully handled the customer inquiry, all they would do is close the tab, and that adjusts their capacity and allows them to receive more work. And great, as I said, that's it from the end user perspective. What we can now do is go into the cool stuff and set up and see exactly how we achieved it. So first things first, let's make sure that Omni is actually set up and enabled for our org. So in the quick find box, obviously type in Omni, go to Omni Channel settings. And you can see here, this top option, enable Omni Channel has been enabled, which is great, which means we can now use the toolkit that Inez mentioned to successfully route work items to users. There's a few different other options here. We have enable skill-based routing. As we kind of mentioned, there's 2 different routing models, or there's 3, but 2 two that are mainly used, which is skill-based and also queue-based, as we mentioned. We'll mention skill-based in a little bit more detail later on, so won't bog down with that just now. Other options as well is enable status-based capacity model, which is a kind of play on what I mentioned earlier, is for users to adjust their capacity, they would close the tabs. There is another option. If you use status-based capacity model, you can actually use the status of the work item to adjust their capacity, and it means you're not having to rely on agents closing down tabs. But again, that's a little bit more of an advanced option. So now that we have enabled Omni, let's take a look at our service channels. Again, if you go to the quick frame box, type in service channels. You can see in this org, as mentioned, they consume two different work types. So we've set up two different service channels. We've got one for chat, and we've also got one for casework. Here is where you would essentially define which Salesforce object is going to be used in your service channel. So here we've got casework. Also, again, other kind of options available, like minimizing the widget automatically when work is accepted. So there is a lot of customization available there. And now we've looked at service channels, let's also take a look at the queues. And again, as mentioned by Inez, they are a staple of Salesforce. But here again, we've kind of two different queue types that we have is for our chat and for our cases. Again, if I drill into the casework here, I'm going to edit. Here you can see, you can define which supported objects are part of your queue. And also you can define which queue members will accept the work. Now this can be achieved via public groups, via roles or users, or you can actually have a combination of those as well, depending on obviously how you want to achieve it. There's also the option here for configuring with a routing configuration, which is another part of Omni. What is routing configuration, you may ask? Well, let's take a look. If I take a look at the routing configurations setup, it's essentially, as it mentions, how work items are routed to your agents. So let's take a look at our chat. So the routing configuration for chat, you can set your settings here for your routing priority, your routing model. Now, priority is essentially how you want to weigh your items, or not weigh your items, sorry, it's to kind of order your items. So the higher the lower priority, the more important it is to yourself. So in our org, chats is routing priority number 1. So this is the most important piece of work because you have a live customer at the end of the chat that you don't want to keep waiting. So this is essentially how you would configure this in your org. Can I mention as well, there is routing model. We have used most available. You can also use things like least active. So again, it all depends on how you want to use it. And we also have the unit of capacity. Now this is another important field. Oh, sorry, let me jump back to the chat. So unit of capacity is the weighting of each work item and in conjunction with another setting. Let me just confirm the name of that. We'll go into it in a minute. So essentially you would use your unit of capacity along with your capacity limit to confirm how many pieces of work that you want your users to handle at the one time. With each item in this org, we've got it set to 5. The overall capacity for each agent would be 20. So it means they can handle 4 pieces of work at the one time. But as kind of mentioned, I'll go through that in a little bit more detail in a second. And the last part of routing configuration is also your queues, as we mentioned. So you would set up exactly which queue you want to use each routing configuration. The other setting I was talking about is one of the presences that Inez mentioned. So if we look at presence configuration. Let's look at our chat agents again. So as kind of mentioned, the overall capacity field here is set at 20. So that confirms exactly how many, or it will define exactly how many work items that a user can handle. Other kind of options in this kind of section here is automatically accepting requests for agents. As you noticed in my demo, we have that kind of obviously not set as true. So agents have to accept the work items, but in some instances, you'd rather the agent would automatically accept rather than allow them to decline the work. It would be achieved here, but we also have the option to allow agents to decline requests, update their status when doing so. Again, other kind of options. And yet you would also assign your configuration either via user or profiles, or a mixture of both. Again, very basic setups. It's only assigned to myself in this org. And lastly, let's take a look at present statuses. So on that drop-down list in the Omni widget, you can see the various different options that we have. If I take a look at the available status, here you can confirm if the user is available to take work or if they're busy. Now, if they're marked as busy in the status, it would just essentially mean they are online in Omni Channel, but they're not available to receive any work items. What you can also do as well is define which selected channels you want the user to take while they're in this status. So in our overall available status here, they have both chat and cases assigned to them, which means they'll receive both types of work. To achieve your, we had different statuses. I'll go back and show you that was available for case and available for chat. Obviously, the difference being with these statuses is that only one channel has been selected, the channel we want the agent to be able to handle. It's also important to notice, important to note with your present statuses is they're actually applied at a profile level, by the profile setting. So if I jump into our system admin profile, they would be assigned in this setting here, which is the service presence status access. And again, you'll be able to define via the profile exactly which status you want to be available to that user. And that's it in the back end. Obviously, once you have enabled Omni, you're going to want to know what your end users are doing and what their productivity is like. So thankfully, with Omni, once you enable it, you actually release 2 more reporting objects into the world of Salesforce. I want to give you a couple of quick examples. So firstly, let's take a look. This is our agent work report type. Again, just throwing together a kind of quick report to give you an idea of what could be achieved. Essentially, you can break this down into each user and which work items they have worked on. It's got some really fundamental kind of reporting figures such as active time, handle time, speed of answer, that'll help you obviously judge your agent's kind of work and their productivity. If I actually edit the report, you'll see there's a lot more fields that are available. Sorry, plenty here, percentage of capacity. There are a lot of different options you can choose here. And again, depending on what you want to measure for your user, you should be able to find it via this report type. The other report that you can have via Omni is your user presence reporting. And the difference here is instead of looking at the work items that the user has taken on, it's actually looking at the statuses that they have selected. So here's the best place to judge that productivity that we mentioned. So you're able to see exactly what status they were in, for how long, what their average capacity was during their session as well. And again, if I go into edit the report type, the report, you'll see there are a lot more reporting fields available. Again, will help you achieve exactly what you're looking for. And one last thing before we end the demo is that sneaky bonus that Inez had mentioned, is your Omni supervisor. So here is essentially where you can monitor your agents in real time. You'll see some handy figures such as their login time, their current capacity, and that obviously relates to their workload, which queues they have been assigned and which status they're in. You can also, as mentioned, there's a quite a handy feature. If the agent is on live chats, you're able to monitor those chats and actually type in whispers to help the agent or end user while they're actually having the chat with the customer. It's also great for an overview in terms of your workload. You can see exactly how much work you have waiting in your queue. So if you do have any chats or cases that are currently in the backlog, they would appear in this tab here. And you can confirm as well how many work items basically have been assigned or are currently open at that point. Excellent. But that is our Omni demo for you. I don't think we need that one there, so jump back into this one anyways.
Yeah, unless there are any questions.
Of course, yeah, if there's any questions.
Yep.
We have one. Can we handle two-way SMS along with calling functionality and saving that info in case? So yes. So for chats, you will have how we call it, chat session, and then SMS, if you're using live messaging, is called messaging session. And you can configure this and say how many people can consume at the time, and similar with calls, right? So whilst the agents have enough capacity, then they can. Okay, maybe one for you, Chris, from Bill. How can an Omni Channel setup be promoted from test environment to a production org?
That's a good question. I'll need to do some research on that because I can't quite remember. I'm sure it was achieved by a change set.
Yeah, I think it's.
Yeah, you were a bit closer to the actual rollout than me, but I'm sure it was achieved by a change set. Let me confirm that, and I'll get back to you guys.
Yeah, and some of the, or majority of the config stuff is API enabled, so you will just do it with whatever thing you're doing today on deployment. So it's not like communities, if that's the question. Okay, we got another one. After clicking on accept button, I want to send one email to my manager. The manager wants to know who has accepted the case. How would you go around that?
I'm sure we'd be able to build something within Process Builder or the flow that would be able to do that. Again, depending, I'm trying to, at the top of my head, think about how that could be achieved. I'm trying to think whereabouts it stamps, obviously the agent has accepted that.
Yeah, and you have the records. Remember, you have the records. So
you've got you've got your reporting types that we kind of mentioned.
Yeah, if you have a record of present status or something related to a work item, then yes.
Well, yeah, you would use the agent work object for that. Absolutely. Just probably the best thing to do.
What exactly means service channel means in Omni Channel? Maybe Chris, if you want to show us back in the back end again, but a service channel is what helps you to turn any sort of Salesforce object into that work record.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's to route the work essentially. So if I go into this casework here, you would use the service channels obviously in conjunction with the other kind of configs that we're talking about. But this, if I go and edit, this is where you set up which object it's going to relate to. Go to queues. So we're on the wrong section. Apologies, I should have more prepared. Yeah, it's just, to give you a breakdown. It's required to set up for the actual routing to the agent. So, I'm trying to remember, you just confirm. Which I'm trying to think exactly where the service channel is then linked to.
And the supported objects. I'm just gonna pop the article here, but yeah, most of the objects, and yes, includes lists as well.
Yeah, there is a few different options within that. Go back, I'll show you.
And then if external routing is implemented, then is mandatory that it should be within the Salesforce, or it can be outside of Salesforce. If external routing is implemented, then it's mandatory it should be within external routing. So Christian, you mind to either unmute yourself or tell us a bit more what you're thinking about?
Hello,
Hello.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, the question is that if I'm implementing the external routing with third-party CTI system, so that external routing should be that the customization part should be implemented within the Salesforce, or it can be hosted in the external system and we can call it within the Salesforce.
So you're talking about to decide which word goes into which queue or something like that.
Yeah, correct.
Well, you can, but then what would you do here? You will do still the queue which users. So it depends if you want to use the Omni supervisor and you want the prompts to come into the widget and all of that, then you will need to still leverage some of the Omni Channel supervisor, unless you want, again, lose that opportunity and have the agents to consume within lists and queues.
Okay. Is there any limitation related to the external routing configuration, like if we want to implement? So is there any limitation related to it?
Well, it depends. You can do whatever you want outside of Salesforce, right? And then the records will come in. I would assume you will still map the records into queues and then users into the queues. So I will still recommend that you will do the configuration so you know which queue goes first, how much the agents can consume. So I don't know how much you will benefit of doing that outside of Salesforce. But if you don't want to use the omni-channel functionality and just have records created within queues, then you can do that too.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, we got another one. Should the administrator know how to build omni-channel, and is there a similar thing on App Exchange? I think I've seen some apps about how you call it, round robin, in terms of assigning different records and all of that. I mean, you know, the world is the sky is the limit. But in terms of knowing how this works, yes, if you're an admin, you should really know how your org is set up. And certainly this one is all config driven. So you will take advantage to understand how the work comes in, how can you report the work, who's consuming what, how much someone can consume. And there are small things that maybe you want to tweak. Sorry, you were saying.
No, it's literally just going to say the exact same thing as you, man. So as an admin and the two orgs that I've worked in, they both use Omni Channel, and I found it very beneficial to go into the back end here and set up and at least have a high level understanding of exactly how things are routed. It gets a little more complicated when you move into the skill routing model, which we'll kind of mention, but skill obviously is you're looking a bit more, because with the new release, you can actually use kind of lightning flow as well for your skill-based routing. So it gets a little bit complicated, but as an admin, it's a great idea. It's a great concept to at least have a high level knowledge of exactly how Omnichannel is set up, especially for troubleshooting.
Okay, and we got another one, which is attribute based routing, but I think for that, which is the skills one, maybe we just do the wrap up one. It'll tie it all together, and again, tell us if it's something else on that.
Sure.
So yeah, so if we just do the recap, remind me what are the things we wanted to cover here, that'll be great. Okay.
Sure.
Priority to finish to start next. I think, is that one you were doing, Chris? I forgot which one I need to do.
I think that one was you, but priority to finish to start next, I think it was more highlighting the importance of priority. And obviously, I kind of briefly talked about it in the demo, is making sure that your priority settings are set correctly so that you're not losing work that you think is the most important to you. Again, from kind of previous examples of when we've kind of released Omni, is we had to work extremely hard to figure out and to map out exactly which pieces of work were going to be the most important for the business and take that on board, so that we had to, yes, I think we wrote this to remind ourselves to obviously confirm that priority is extremely important.
Yeah, and the thing is that if you have something priority 1, the setup won't be serving your agents priority 2 until priority 1 is finished.
Correct.
So let's say, if you have two areas of the world where they may have the same channel, but one has really low volume and the other one really high volume, you may want to have the low volume as a higher priority, so it can be consumed and finished, then the other one, which has higher volume, it will be worked on. Otherwise, you kind of diminish the ones that has less volume, and they're gonna need to wait for the high volume priority to be consumed. So yeah, just want to keep in mind. And then skills, which is the attribute-based routing. And skills were there really when the thing went live. And I personally don't recommend using skills, because if you use skills, which is something that you can set up, and within a user record, you can select multiple skills for a user, you tied yourself into be able to use certain things. So unless it has changed in a couple of releases, you were not able to use the agent supervisor if you were using skills, for example. And there are some other like little considerations. Again, documentation will be there. So what we do, what we used to do is name your queues. I mean, queues are such a flexible thing that you can be using it for skills. So when I was working with Chris, we segment the queues on kind of skills, on area, on language, and you can have multiple different versions of that. And that gives you wider flexibility to decide who's going into each one of the queues. And you don't lose functionality. So skills are there, you can use them, but I personally find them much more flexible using queues instead.
Yeah, so the next point that we're going to talk about was status proliferation. This was something, again, yeah, in our experience that we kind of came up against, was finding the balance of your present statuses and not having too little or too many. And it sounds really simple, but in practice, it's not. You don't want to have obviously too many to make it a little more complicated for the end user, and to see little habits creep in where they just choose the first one that's available. If you get into that kind of situation, you're finding that your data on the back end of reporting is essentially useless, because you won't really have a full understanding of what your end users are doing and how their day is kind of productively being used. On the flip side of that, you do not want to have too little, because again, the data out at the back end is not going to be worth much, because again, you're not really capturing the day-to-day for your end user. You're basically leaving it as online and offline. And yes, it's good to understand if your agent's online or not, but you could with more options in the service the service dates is actually have a look at what they're doing and be able to analyze a bit further, so that you can spot trends or you can spot issues. And yeah, so I think it's a really difficult task. And again, it sounds really simple, but it's quite difficult to find that balance.
Yeah, just think about pick lists, right? You don't want to give too many options to your users. It's just unfair, and a small manual effort is a wider margin of error. So just keep it simple for what you want to report. I'll personally suggest, 4, 5 max. It's just really unfair otherwise. And what's the point? It's either somebody busy or on break, and that's it. Because we all can come up with 100 different things and options there. But yeah, just keep it simple. That's a good mantra. And then superpowers your status. So the superpower of the supervisor view is fantastic. So use it. One of the things that you could do there as a supervisor is you change the status of somebody. So for example, I got on break and then I forgot to change my status. I am a human, it's normal. As a supervisor, I know that you're back and you're ready, so I can change that for you. And also it gives you the opportunity, if you can, to give that view to all the users. So I see no harm to give the ability for all the users to see what's going on. Transparency is another great mantra to have. So you give the ability to see everybody's plate and how you can help each other.
Absolutely. No, it's again, it was something we wrestled with when we first deployed Omni Channel within Hive, was do we want everyone to have this option? Do we want all end users to be able to see exactly? And as you kind of mentioned, we chose to. We thought it had a lot more upside than it did down. And yeah, the next kind of section was capacity, and again, something I touched on slightly was having the option of having either your capacity changed once the tab is closed, or dependent on the status of the work item. Both have obviously their positives and their negatives. We, again, drawing on past experience, we went with the actual closing of the work item itself, but there's absolutely positives to using your status. I kind of mentioned or kind of issues that you might see in the past of the agents forgetting to close that tab, and they're sitting there with a work item which they've actually finished, but they won't consume any more work because they have forgotten to close the tab. So using the status of the case or the chat or obviously whatever item you do choose to definitely has its upside.
And yeah, and I think the work item status only came about maybe, I don't know, 3-4 releases ago. So it's relatively new for that time that we used to work together, I think, at first it didn't exist.
It did come in though, while we were working together. So it was a change we could have made, but I think we decided to keep it as obviously keeping it with the tab option.
Yeah, there is so much change one user can handle at once, I suppose.
That's true. Yeah.
Which leads to the funky thing at the end, which is what is in it for me. So for the functionality to work, do invest time to get people on board, right? This is not like a top-down approach. And the functionality is very powerful, but it's not there to micromanage. It's there to enable and help so that the IQ and effort and time and wonders are invested into a better customer service. So definitely invest the time to get that rollout and adoption, get users using it, piloting it, becoming your champions, and they're going to help you across the organization to keep it going. Is certainly something that it can always get better, how you roll out and how you help your adoption, different tools, visibility, dashboards that you can put together so that it becomes a common goal for everybody.
Yeah, nothing really to add to that. You kind of hit the nail on the head. It's as you said, it's essential, I think, for a rollout of Omni is to have all areas included that you can that are going to be affected by the change, especially that end user. The more feedback you get from them, the smoother the transition is going to be.
Okay, so any other questions or any other thoughts? You know, we also take kudos if that comes handy to you. Otherwise, let's slide it